As the month of May comes to a close, this is the last Sunday of the month of May. Can you believe it? Time rolls on. But as May comes to a close, several things happen. One of them is graduation from high school and college, and graduation occurs. Blessed time, and we have some wonderful graduates, I believe 7 altogether, that we're going to honor tonight. I want to encourage all of you to be back tonight to hear letters read concerning these seniors. Joey will have a presentation. It'll be a great time to be together, but high school graduation is a wonderful time, a wonderful thing to happen, and I, once again, encourage you to be here. But it's also a time when Memorial Day rolls around, and I appreciated so much Brother Danny's prayer dealing with the things that we consider about Memorial Time, because it is a time that we recognize our people who are in the military service, but a time especially to remember those who died in service. That's what Memorial Day is all about. And while we remember those, we must remember, of course, that we're in a spiritual warfare. And we had one die for us that made all the difference in the world. And that was Jesus Christ, the leader of the organization who gave his life that we might have life. And what a wonderful occasion. And every Sunday we gather and we remember this occasion when Jesus died on that cross for us. Then we must remember that each of us carry a cross as well. We're not at a picnic. Christian life is not a picnic. Christian life is compared to warfare. And we must enlist in that war and be a part of it in fighting evil and in fighting for the cause of good. It's also a time to reflect on another fact of life, which is a fact of death. Hebrews 9 verse 27 lays it out plain for us that man is destined to die once, and after that to face judgment. And one day, if Jesus does not come in the interim while we're still alive, there's going to be a stone that will be erected for us, and our name will be chiseled on that stone. If you were to write your own epitaph, what would you write on your tombstone? Heard about one person who said that his wife kept saying that, when I die, I want written on my tombstone, I told you I was sick. I don't know that any of you would want that written on your tombstone. I think one of the funniest ones that I ever saw was not the actual inscription, but somebody's addendum to it that was written on there with crayons. But I saw one time, actually I heard about it. My dad told it so many times I thought I had seen it. But he said he saw a tombstone that was inscribed something of this nature. As I faced the strife that came to me through life, so you must also face. And now as I take my last breath and enter death, you must follow. And somebody has inscribed on it with a crayon, to follow you I'm not content, until I know which way you went. Well, we can find humor even if we're dealing with tombstones, because in dealing with death, we know that the victory is already there, the victory over death. 1 Corinthians 15 claims victory, and it's because Jesus gave his life that we once again might live. Now, I gave you the thought about what would you write on your own tombstone. What do you think others might write about you on your tombstone? Came across a poem, The Dash. There's 2 of these out right now, and you may have read one that's really circulating big right now in cards, and I think there's a book out, a little movie about it. But it's The Dash by Linda Ellis. But this one was by an author that has written more than any other that I've ever seen. Anonymous has written more stuff. Can you imagine how much Anonymous has written? But it's concerning the dash on the tombstone. I want to share it with you and then have some thoughts concerning it. Said Memorial Day was over now. All I had left, and I was alone. I began to read the names and dates chiseled there on every stone. The stone shows whether it was mom or dad or daughter or baby son. The dates were different, but the amount the same. There were 2 on every one. It was then I noticed something. It was but a simple line. It was the dash between the dates placed there. It stood for time. All at once it dawned on me how important that little line, the dates placed there, belonged to God. But that line is yours and mine. It's God who gives us precious life and God who takes away. But that line in between He gives to us to do with what we may. We know God's written the first date down of each and every one, and we know those hands will write again, for the last date has to come. We know He'll write the last date down. And soon we know for some, but upon the line between my dates, I hope He'll write, well done. There is a time that we are going to leave this life, as I said, unless Jesus comes first. But what would be inscribed if God were to write your epitaph? About the life that you have, I think it is something that we all need to consider. When I was looking at the poem, The Dash, and I had every intent of using Linda Ellis's poem to begin with, but I found this other, and I love the conclusion on it. I hope that He'll write on that dash, well done. When I read that, I said, no, this is the one that needs to go. This is the big one. But when I found the poem, I found with it also a story about a bluegrass song that caught my attention. I have never heard the song, but at least that I know of, but I read the words and I thought they were so good. It said that there was a farmer and a teacher and a hooker and a preacher that were all on the same bus heading for Mexico. The farmer was going for vacation, the teacher for education, but the other 2 were going for lost souls. Think about that one for a moment. The hooker and the preacher both had lost souls in mind, but for different purposes. And on the way, the bus driver wasn't able to hit the brakes in time and hit an 18-wheeler. And it killed many on the bus, and there were 3 markers by the side of the road, not 4. There was one for the teacher, one for the preacher, and one for the farmer. The person writing the song said, I don't know why there wasn't a 4th one, but it became clear as the song progressed, because after that wreck, the preacher had been talking to this hooker about changing her life and handed her his blood-stained Bible and said, can't you see glory land? And he gave her the Bible. And it came down that it was a preacher who was telling the story. And it was another preacher, but it was the son of the hooker whose mother read him the Bible that was handed to her in the wreck. And I think sometimes that dash starts out and it's headed the wrong direction. That dash is not going from date to date, it's headed down. But it can be turned around. I don't know where you are in life, where your life is taking you. But I think all of us need to reflect, if God were to write my epitaph, what would He chisel on my tombstone? Oh, I hope He would put, servant, well done. But as I began to reflect upon that thought, I realized that there are many times that the Bible refers to people that have gone on, and it refers to the life that they had there between dates. What happened on that dash as they were going through life? Some of the lives were very brief, and some of them quite long. The dash may be different in length, but we all need to have God say, well done, when it comes to that dash. Abel lived approximately. Now, these are all approximate dates, and Abel, sure enough, is a little approximate. But we know that Seth was born shortly after, so we have a closing date somewhere around 3783 BC. Adam Clark just gave a guess as 3825, somewhere around, 42 years old. Take 25, 17, put them together, and you go backwards when you're dealing with BCs. What would have been written about Abel? Well, we learn in Hebrews 11 and verse 4, by faith he still speaks, even though he is dead. What a thing to be inscribed on your tombstone. And as we think about these things and look at the tombstones that I'm going to be placing before you today, and remembering people from our own congregation this past calendar year, or actually between Memorial Day last year, when we remembered many of our people who had died in our congregation, until Memorial Day tomorrow, we lost, of course, Sister Stevens, and we also lost our lovable, that brings tears to my eyes when I think of brother or Sister Shirley Bailey. And the last time before she went into the hospital, I was seeing her down here at the front, singing like an angel. It was a tremendous, tremendous occasion. But you think of these people who have passed, and it makes you realize that this life is short. Some lives are longer, some are not. But what would be placed upon our tombstone? And as we reflect on that at the end of the lesson, if you have a response to make to start turning your life in a different direction, maybe you're not a member of the Lord's army yet, and you want to put on Jesus and become a part of that army and serve Him, what an occasion to do it today. If your life is going the wrong direction and you need to turn that life around, it can be done with the help of Jesus. I can't do it on my own. You can't do it on your own. But with the help of Jesus, it can be done. Look at these epitaphs. Reflect on where your life is going. And if you need to respond at the end of the lesson, the opportunity will be there. What about Abraham? In fact, I put down 3 different chisel stones for Abraham, who lived to be 175 years old. Approximate dates are there. Between those 2 lines, Abraham lived a life that led the writer to say in Hebrews 11 and verse 9, by faith he made his home in the promised land. We can make our home in the promised land right now. We can do it by accepting Jesus Christ. Abraham also, in verse 10, same chapter of Hebrews, chapter 11, he looked forward to the city whose architect is God. Now, the full inscription would have said, he looked forward to the city with foundations whose architect is God. Abraham looked forward to the end of his life because he knew where the dash was at the present time, where his life was going, and had no fear of death. And because of these first 2 inscriptions, I have another inscription to show you that appears in James chapter 2, verse 23, that says, because of faith, he was called God's friend. I got to see the tombstone of my great-grandmother in Oklahoma City one time. Wilsie and I were just looking for genealogical things, and it led us into courthouses and graveyards and libraries, and we were in a graveyard in Oklahoma City and found her grave, and it just had M.A. Borden, a Christian. What else needs to be said? But wouldn't you love to have this inscribed on your tomb? Is that where your life is going? Is that where you're headed? That God would say, he was my friend. Noah, 2948 to 198 BC. And I want you to look at that exit date. I'll remind you here in just a moment again. But in Hebrews 11 and 7, it is said, by faith he built an ark to save his family. Have you done things to move your family toward Jesus Christ? Have you encouraged them? Have you seen to their commitment? Have you been there to be a blessing to them? Noah built an ark. I don't have to build an ark, but I can build a home where Jesus lives, and I can encourage my family to live the kind of life where we can all be united in Jesus in eternity. Noah built an ark to save his family. Moses, 1571 to 1451. Moses would have lived to be 70. And during that time, or 120, I'm sorry, it's David that lived to be 70, but Moses lived to be 120. Numbers 12 and verse 3 said he was more humble than anyone else. Oh, of all the kind of characteristics that I could have, humility is one that we all need to reach for. We all need to strive for, to see others better than ourselves. What a wonderful thing to have inscribed that would describe a life. Was this person saw others as better than himself, more humble than anyone else. Now David, who lived to be not too old, 70 years old, if you take the 84 and look at 14 from 84, 70. David was 30 when he became king and just lived 40 years as king. I hadn't really ever stopped to think about how short a life actually that David had. But during that time in Acts 13:22, he lived such a life that this inscription could be given about him. It was said after his death, a man after God's own heart. Are you seeing these things and asking yourself, what would God, through inspiration, inscribe about me once I die? Tabitha, also called Dorcas, lived approximately, who knows when she was born, but died approximately 56 A.D., a guess, perhaps 5 A.D. Acts 9 verse 36 said, she always did good and helped the poor. Tabitha, what would be inscribed upon yours? Because one day there will be a tombstone, and it will have my name on it. You will have one, it will have your name on it, unless Jesus comes first. And there will be a date when I was born and when you were born, and there will be a dash in between. What will we do on that dash? As I read the book of Matthew in chapter 25, Judgment Day has occurred, and there are people passing before the throne, and some were said, go in, my good and faithful servant, go through the door into eternity to live with me forever. These were called sheep, but here are things they did. Matthew 25:35 records it. They fed the hungry. Have you been one who cares for the needs of other people? And I'm going to apply this two different directions. Not only for those who give food to the hungry and give drink to the thirsty, but I'm going to give you that not only in physical terms, but in spiritual as well. There are people in this world who are hungering and thirsting to know more about God. Do we feed them? Do we give them drink? Would God say this to me? You fed the hungry. Had that on your tombstone. You gave drink to the thirsty. Had that on your tombstone. Enter, good and faithful servant. Or when we go to the next verse, what about you clothed the naked? And of course they were puzzled. When did we do this? Jesus said, when you did it to the least of the kingdom, you did it for me. Have you clothed the naked? Galatians 3:27 jumps off the page to me at this time. And that's that when we accept Jesus Christ in baptism, we are clothed with him. Have you clothed the naked? Have you taken Jesus to the world and encouraged people to become a part of the battle? Because the victory's already won. Help them to be a part of the victory. You visited the sick. When did we do this? When you did it for the least in the kingdom, you did it for me. I see this in two realms once again. I see this being physical. We had our clothing day yesterday here at the church building on the fourth Sunday instead of the third, because we were making arrangements for the seminar, the marriage seminar that happened the week before. We give clothing to the poor. But what about the spiritual clothing? We visit the sick. But what about those who are sick spiritually? I see this being a two-realmed kind of thing. That do we go to those who are already clothed in Jesus, but they're suffering, they're having problems living the kind of life that they need to live? Are we of encouragement to them to help them to return to the right way? And some, according to Matthew 25:36, would say, you visited those in prison. And I see this almost going full circle. Have you fed and given drink to the hungry and thirsty? Have you visited those in prison? I see two kinds of prison. I see a physical prison, but I see a prison of evil that has imprisoned souls. And what have you done for these kind of people? Where are you in life? Where has your dash led you? What would God write about you? One tombstone that I put up would never be found, but it's one that would sure be great if it happened, and that's Enoch. Notice that Enoch was born, according to Adam Clark, about 3017 BC. No expiration date, because it was written about him in Hebrews 11 and verse 5, he pleased God and did not experience death. One day, Enoch simply was no more, because the scripture says God translated him, took him to heaven. What a wonderful thing to have happen if Jesus came and I didn't have to experience death. Either way, whether your dash has a date at the end of it, or whether your dash is just out there and Jesus comes, the dash has been given to us from God to do with. And as Memorial Day approaches, it's time for each of us to examine, not everybody else, to examine ourselves. If while we sing this song you realize that your dash needs to take a turn, your dash needs to have something to complete it, the option will be yours to respond. Won't you come forward while we stand and sing together?
Flip it.
He is able, more than able, to accomplish what concerns me today. He is able, more than able, to handle anything that comes my way.